This is FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. Dan Lynch joins me today, and we talk about MindsDB, which does open source machine learning for developers. That's up next. FLOSS Weekly is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Stay in control when it comes to your company's access points and authentication. LastPass makes enterprise-level security simple for your remote workforce. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is FLOSS Weekly, episode 579, recorded Wednesday, May 20th, 2020. MindsDB. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. WWT's outcome-based approach to agile software development and engineering delivers value to customers early and often. Are you ready to solve your toughest business challenges with custom software produced at the speed of your business? Visit wwt.com/twit1 and let them make your vision a reality. Hi, everybody. Welcome to FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. I'm joined this morning by Dan Lynch, and we're going to be talking to Jorge Torres about MindsDB, his company. And so Dan is in Liverpool, which I believe has nothing to do with liver or pool, does it? I have no idea.
Morning, Doc. It's the name is an interesting one. So I forget the name of it. I think it may have been Francis Bacon or something like that who said Liverpool is the pool of life. But I think he said that after it had been named that. I don't think we haven't got a lot of stuff going on with liver here. But we have got a bit of a pool. We're by the sea, so we've got the pool. But
yeah, I think for most people, at least in my generation, it's the Beatles, and then for the rest of them, it's a football club, and that's about all we know. So people know I've done my best this morning to isolate the sound here, but they parked a wood chipper at the end of my driveway earlier, and when I was trying to record some ads ahead of time, and every time I'd start this thing, like the sound of a chainsaw and then a tree being ingested by a wood chipper followed. It was pretty awful. So it seems quiet now. So that's a good thing. So Dan, are you familiar with MindsDB yet? And do you have any preliminaries on that?
Yeah, I have to confess, I've just been doing some research today into it to have a look at it. So I know a very small amount about machine learning, which is what we're going to be talking about today with Jorge, which is great because it's something that I want to learn a lot more about. I think it's something that's a real growing area in computing in general, artificial intelligence, machine learning, intelligent agents, all those kind of things. I know all the buzzwords, but I'm not sure what they all mean. So this will be a greater chance for me to speak to an expert and find out a lot more about it. But it looks very cool. Relatively quite a new project, and it'd be interesting to talk about how they came to be, because they actually got early on. They went through the Y Combinator process, which we can ask them about, which is something some of our listeners may find useful actually.
So that's great. So we'll be back with Jorge Torres of MindsDB right after this. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. WWT's software development experts use constant customer collaboration to create custom solutions better than what could have been imagined at the start of the project. Great software can change lives, transform businesses, and disrupt industries. Let WWT solve your toughest challenges with its proven approach to agile software development. WWT delivers end-to-end digital experiences that blend best-in-class software development with the strength, capabilities, and expertise of a multi-billion-dollar technology integrator. If you're looking for the rare partner who can deliver both strategy and execution for your next project, WWT is the partner for you. WWT worked with a world-renowned hospital to help patients and families better navigate a complex care journey. WWT created a custom software app where care teams could interface with patients and where families had all of the info they needed at their fingertips, from travel arrangements to scheduling appointments to wayfinding. Within a year, the hospital started seeing results. Reduction in preventable readmissions for patients, fewer days spent in the hospital with virtual care, fewer septic shock deaths occurred with patients treated remotely. Their app has been so successful that they were nominated for a Webby Award, and get this, they just found out that they won. Partnering with WWT, one of America's favorite sandwich chains, brought digital transformation to more than 1,500 stores. The customer's investment in next-gen technology included mobile, kiosk, point of sale, and loyalty enhancements. The technology is positioned to scale with the company's pace of growth and has enhanced its ability to deliver best-in-class service. WWT also worked with a large grocery retailer to improve its customer experience, and that led to the creation of a custom app, a loyalty program, and enhanced signage. WWT helped the chain achieve its 2- and 3-year goals in less than 1 year. So create a custom app or digital experience that exceeds your customers' expectations. They use true agile software development, from planning and ideation to delivery. DevOps, which combines people, processes, and technology to help your teams continuously deliver services and value to your customers with speed, stability, and availability. Container platforms, cloud-native technologies, and best practices that help you rapidly create services that can scale and perform. So solve your toughest challenges with software experts at WWT who have the experience, discipline, and track record of developing custom software solutions that provide real value. Transform your business and deliver great experiences through WWT's wide range of software services. Go to wwt.com/twit1. That's wwt.com/twit1. WWT, delivering business outcomes and modernizing IT infrastructure. So let's bring our guest, Jorge Torres of MindsDB, and Dan Lynch. Thanks for being with us, Jorge. You're a rookie to this show, and I'm a rookie as well. You're on your website. You give the short story. I'm wondering if you could just start out by giving us kind of a longer saga of how you came to be where you are today, and we can launch into some Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. So my co-founder and I, Adam, we've been friends for a long time, and it all started as drinking buddies and trying to build a system that will predict market movements to see if we could trade automatically. And that really, back in university, kind of made us see how machine learning was going to be a crucial part of our lives. And we understood that many people could benefit from that. So we've been working in machine learning for the past 12 years. And essentially what we've seen is that the steps that companies have to follow in order to successfully apply machine learning are always the same or very similar. And the other thing that we see is that a lot of people make informed decisions with machine learning, but the great majority of individuals that have data are not using that data to make more informed decisions. And therefore, we decided to set ourselves into the mission of empowering as many individuals as possible to be able to use their data to combine their intuitions with the data they have and make better decisions. So that's essentially the story that we have. And now we're in this very interesting space where we believe that data scientists are important, but they're important in research and to understand where machine learning should go. But we should empower as many people as possible to do machine learning without having to know the really deep details about the implementation of machine learning, and then shift the scope or the kind of like the conversation into how can they apply it in their day-to-day jobs and what do they need to know in order to make sure that it's safe and is trustworthy. So that's essentially what MindsDB is at the moment.
So just help our audience a little bit, because I think there are many different sort of assumptions, if not definitions, for machine learning, and especially where that either is different than or flows into AI, and sort of if you can disambiguate that a little bit to get us launched here.
Yeah, I think that if you were to think about it, AI is a broad term that just essentially means that machines can eventually think like humans can, or like smart beings can. And then machine learning is just a tool to make that a possibility, or like a reality. And therefore, the way that we see the world is that today we don't really need artificial intelligence for most of the problems that we talk and that we actually need to solve. Machine learning will make it so that a lot of those problems can be solved faster and more efficiently. And you don't really need to replace human kind of like cognitive capabilities. As a matter of fact, in MindsDB, we believe that the human cognitive capability should be augmented by means of machine learning, and that's where we see it. Does that give you a better picture?
Yeah, I mean, it does. Yeah, I mean, thanks for that, Jorge. It's an interesting area, and as I was saying in the little intro we did there, that it seems to be a growing area, something that just seems to be picking up speed all the time. I've had a little play with the likes of Watson, the IBM Watson platform, stuff that they're trying to do where you can try and train it. So when you say about that, the examples I've been through are things like training it to look for certain types of items in photographs and stuff. That's the sort of thing you mean, pattern recognition, things that so the machine can chug through a lot more than a human could?
Exactly. I think that you put it in the best words possible. Essentially, humans and a lot of our cognitive capabilities are based on our capacity to recognize patterns and then infer some logic behind those patterns. And we're limited by the capacity that we have to ingest data. Whereas computers, they have been built to ingest and surpass our capacity to ingest and process data. And therefore, machine learning can be applied over much larger amounts of data than what a human could possibly go through. And that's where we see this very interesting fusion between what humans understand as the domain of a problem, and then being able to augment their capacities by using a machine to ingest and process all the data that a human cannot viably do. To give you an example, a doctor, for instance, it is unlikely that after someone seeing more than 100 patients or 1,000 patients, they can remember absolutely everything about all of their patients. Whereas a computer can just really go through a lot of their patients' history very quick. And if you could merge those two worlds and empower machine learning to kind of see those patterns that a doctor could not just go through in a matter of a few seconds, but then empower that doctor to get those insights and make the most important decision for that case. So if you go to the doctor and all of a sudden the doctor can just see what's wrong with you, by being able to analyze all the data that a clinical system may have about you, then they can probably make a good recommendation or a much better recommendation that they would just by asking you 5 or 6 questions. But then again, the doctor's capabilities to have this power to define what is the right path for you and the right recommendation.
I mean, so it's like having a doctor who can remember every case they've ever dealt with and access that information quickly and compare it, which is amazing, which is kind of, I suppose, a little bit like what doctors are doing, but forgive them, they can't remember everything, which makes sense. I'm sure if they're anything like me, they struggle to remember everything. So there's this idea of training then, isn't there, which is really interesting to me. So you need a significant data set. I'm not really a data scientist, but you need a certain size of data set in order to make to train the system to then be effective. Does it just keep getting better and better as it goes on?
Yeah, so you're right. Machine learning cannot happen without data. If you don't have data, then there's nothing that the machine can learn from. And therefore, in theory, the more data you have, the better it can get at learning. But it also involves that as you get more data, the systems can be also more sophisticated to deal with larger amounts of data and with different types of data. But again, I think that for us, it's really important to reinforce the fact that keeping a human in the loop is what is crucial. And I think that that's what differentiates the vision of MindsDB from other tools out there. We're not here to replace the domain expert. And in fact, we believe that a lot of the problems that exist today with machine learning and artificial intelligence is that you bring in these domain experts that have years and years of experience in a specific industry. And then if you replace them with a system that is making decisions for them, you're losing a lot of that domain expertise. Whereas a world in which you allow the machine learning to ingest more and more data, but still keep the domain expert behind the driving wheel, that is the ideal world. So essentially, if you're a clinician or if you're a pilot, you should be really the one that is making the decisions and that defines what is important to be predicted or not, and then just use machine learning as a tool to augment their capacity.
Yeah, so you're providing them with options, basically. It's a tool for the domain expert, as you call them, be it a doctor, physical doctor, or whoever it may be in their field, to get more information and have a better understanding of the information. Is that fair?
Correct. And say, for instance, if you were going to predict if someone is going to develop cancer, by asking a few questions, you could have like some sort of understanding if that patient may go into that path. But for instance, it is impossible for a doctor to go and analyze all of that specific human genome. And a machine could do that. And therefore empower this specific doctor or oncologist with better data tools to make this decision and to understand what will be the next step in that journey of that specific patient. And you can see that in every single field where there are people that have studied and worked in those industries for a long time. It's just that now they're kind of like drowning in data. And the best thing that we can do for them is to provide tools for them to use that data and to use predictive capabilities on top of this data. Because today, when you're drowning in data, the best thing that you can do is a guess of where, in which direction each of your decision is going to go. But if that guess was kind of like augmented by some informed guess, because again, machine learning nonetheless is guessing, if you may, or is giving you a prediction, and those predictions cannot be certain, but they're at least taking into account the information that you have.
So I'd like to ask a question, because this whole topic, your whole area of expertise, it seems especially relevant at the moment that we're all in the midst of a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic, where there's lots of new information coming in, lots of new data coming from all over the place. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit either about how it's being used or how it could be used to apply to the problem that all of us are facing right now, which is there's lots of conflicting information. We don't know who to trust. What's the good approach there?
Yeah. So I can give you some precise examples. Say, for instance, in Mexico, where the growth of patients with the infection is exponential, and a lot of the different kind of like sub-governments have not taken the right actions to prevent that from happening. And it's getting to the point where they cannot feasibly test everyone. And it's becoming harder and harder to really understand where you should channel your efforts. One way that you can utilize data is to track symptoms, for instance, of the population. So if you ask them how they're feeling, then you can have a predictive model that can decide how likely this specific groups of people are from having the virus, and then channel your efforts to specific regions. And therefore, you're not just kind of like throwing spaghetti at a wall and see where you should spend your resources, like medical resources and infrastructure, but you can make very precise moves that will help you tackle the problem, and again, using the data that you have. And also the resources that you have available. Since you don't have the capability to test everyone, just by asking a few questions, we have already enough information to kind of have a good predictor of someone having or not having the virus without even testing them, just by the symptoms that they're experiencing. And also if they've been exposed to people that are close by, and if close by there has been a large amount of people that experience similar symptoms that you have. So that's one of those examples where you can utilize data that can be generated easily, and then you can make better decisions to tackle a big problem that is getting out of hand. In the case of development of medications and possible treatments, you can also use all the kind of like amounts of data that we've collected so far about the specific research that has been done in this particular virus, and then try to help the researchers navigate this information better, because it's impossible for a specific individual to go and read every single paper that has been published about this. But if you provide them tools that will help them kind of funnel the best information for them, you can use machine learning for this. So that's the type of collaboration that we see possible.
I'm wondering, I mean, we're living at a moment right now when all the news in the world, I mean, it's all medical, and I imagine that, I mean, looking at your site and hearing from you that a huge percentage of your work is in the medical field. I'm wondering two things. One is we could stick with that because that is incredibly interesting, but also I'm wondering, you know, obviously it's a broad topic. You could probably apply in a bunch of other fields. So I'm wondering if what adjacent or different fields that you're also working on.
Yeah. So, and it's great that you ask this. Essentially, what we discovered is that anyone that has data could use machine learning, and that's why we decided to open source MindsDB. To make sure that even if you're not within the specific field that we want to kind of commercially pursue, you can benefit from our understanding of a machine learning problem. And one of the things that we discovered is that machine learning as a concept can be extrapolated to different domains. And therefore, you can break that problem in a very similar way, regardless of it being medicine or it being finance or any specific area of research that you may have, even retail. And if you break it down into the right building blocks, it looks like if you're building Legos. And that's essentially what MindsDB allows you to do. So it breaks the problem into what are those basic Lego building blocks, and then it puts them together for you. And we open source it so that the vast majority of people that have data could apply machine learning without having to be a PhD or like a researcher or even having to hire one. And especially because initially you don't even know what is the value of these predictions. You just have an idea that they may work or not. And you want to be able to validate this very quick. And MindsDB enables this.
That sounds really cool. Let's get geeky and talk about the nuts and bolts of this kind of stuff, because I know some of the people in the chat room there are asking about data formats, all kinds of stuff. We've got a great kind of really technical audience, probably more technical than us, as you may notice. But so what exactly? So MindsDB itself is a platform that I would get and I would download and install or build my own servers with, or is it a cloud platform that you provide and then I would kind of just I would then query it? Can I run it? How does that work? Do you host versions yourself?
Yeah, so we understand that data is really the gold for many people, and we didn't want to be another Google or another Amazon that just kind of like build infrastructure so long you use their services and pay for that. For us, if we were really bought into the vision of democratizing this, we wanted to enable anyone to do it without compromising the sensitivity of their data. And therefore, we designed MindsDB with one principle, which is you should be able to use it and use it in your own infrastructure. And the simplest path for that was to make it a library that any developer could install. And of course, around this library, we have a server that you can also deploy in your own infrastructure. But the basic entry point is just a normal library, a Python library that you can include into your project. And then you can start asking questions if you have some data. So with one line of code, you can tell it, from this data that I have prepared, I want to learn the specific columns. And then MindsDB will figure out the rest. And then it'll provide you the tools for you to explore what happened when that learning kind of was put in place. So you can actually get into the explainability side of machine learning, which is crucial for someone that may not necessarily be a expert in machine learning to understand three simple things. When can they trust that this model is behaving the way that you expect it to behave? When you shouldn't trust it. And when you have a specific prediction, initially you want to validate that it goes aligned with your intuitions, or at least show you why your intuitions are wrong. So you should be able to probe this model and get explanations for why that prediction and why not something else. And ultimately, to make you aware that these predictive models are only as good as the data that you provide. And therefore, we show you information such as, are there biases in your data or potential biases? And are there outliers that you should be kind of aware of just in case they happen to present in future predictions? So you can improve the way that you build your model.
Excellent. So the entry point, as you say, would be for me if I'm writing a Python application to just import a library. Now, people are asking in the chat room there, does the library doesn't contain data? So what I have to build that I would build the data set myself and then feed it to a kind of a remote server if I were using another instance or having one locally. How would I actually go about kind of deploying it?
Yeah. So the entry point being the library, you deploy it on your program, whatever program you're building, if you're building a program. And we decided that in order to really democratize machine learning, the easiest or the path to least friction were individuals that could kind of massage data. And developers have this very interesting kind of power because they're kind of like this Swiss Army knife that can do many things. And preparing data is one of those skills that they have. On the other hand, out of 100 developers, really only 2 or 3 really know how to do machine learning well. So we're empowering those 13 million developers that today don't know how to do machine learning properly, but also allowing them to use the tools that they know how to use and do the things that they know how to do as well, which is putting data together. So long your data is in a table, and this table can be built from like many different data sources, but so long your data is in one single table, then you can tell MindsDB, okay, I want from this table, I want to predict this columns, and use the rest as information to learn how to predict those columns that I want to predict. On the other hand, we understand that a lot of people don't have the need to run this library inside their programs. They just want to access this through like an API and even through a graphical user interface. So we have a MindsDB server that allows you to do this and to also consume your machine learning models from programming languages that are not necessarily Python, like JavaScript. And there are so many other stacks that we wanted to ensure that you could still do this. But just to summarize, you can start with a Python library, and the Python library doesn't suit your use case. There's a MindsDB server, again, that can run on your premise. You install it on your server or your cloud, and then you can access this through like a normal API. We have SDKs for various languages. And on top of this, we have an explainability graphical user interface that you can attach to whatever you build, either via your Python scripts or via the server, so you can explore and ask these questions that can help you build trust in the model that you've built.
Excellent. So you talk about trust, which is an interesting thing, because if I'm using a service that you're hosting, if I'm just doing it easily with the API, as you say, and then I'm going to be sending my data to your servers, presumably. So are there concerns about things like security and stuff, or protection of that data around that?
Yeah. So again, I think that it's important for us to clarify that you won't be sending any data to us. You install the server on your server. So by all angles, we're not even looking at your data. We're just telling you how to install one of our servers in your infrastructure. And we ensure that when you exchange data between that server and your different applications, that data is encrypted. But again, we don't see and we don't have any visibility of what your data is. We're just providing you a server that you install in your own infrastructure. So essentially is an on-premise solution. And we want to make that differentiation because today, we really know that data is what companies and individuals consider the true asset in this information era. And we want you to keep that asset within your coffins.
Excellent. So you're keeping your data local. That makes a lot of sense. So if I what kind of hardware or software do I need to run this then? It's just the server side of things, I mean, rather than the client side. So if I want to deploy this onto my, do you have images for, say, Linux distributions, or are there Docker containers and things that I can get? Presumably you've got quite a good community around that. So have you got tools to make it easy for me to kind of spin up a virtual a virtual instance of this?
Yeah, so the easiest path is a container, which we have, a Docker container, and you can deploy this in any kind of supported infrastructure. If you want to go bare bones, that means without the container, we have a script that so long your Linux distribution is one of the popular ones, you should be able to run this, and it will install it seamlessly. And again, you can also run it in a virtual environment, and it will be similar as if you had it in a container. But essentially, we're trying to provide our users the capacity to deploy this with the least amount of friction. And as you clearly pointed out, the path that is easier is if you already have Docker infrastructure, then you can deploy this with one of our Docker images.
And scalability as well must be another thing that people, do people start off small? Because one of the things that I suppose Docker gives us is and other tools as well, but Docker's kind of the one that springs to mind, is a way to kind of deploy a lot of these. So do you have to think about scalability a lot in the creation of MindsDB? Is that something that concerns you?
So we're lucky that most of the problems that people have are not big data problems. Like most companies rarely have beyond the hundreds of gigabytes of data to learn from. So to answer that question, most people don't even have to concern themselves with the scalability problem yet. That being said, MindsDB is built such that it can scale both horizontally and vertically. So you can make your servers bigger, or you can have a cluster, and we enable that capability. But really, it is important for us to bring it down into that most people really don't have, especially when it comes to the domain of machine learning, they don't have a big data problem initially. They may have it later in the future, and MindsDB enables and empowers them to scale as their needs also scale up. But we understand that we want to make it as simple as possible, and therefore not have people think about clusters or any kind of like distributed computing, because that's not the problem that most people have initially, even though we support it.
So I'm wondering, because it's always a top question, especially with developers, what license you're using and how that works in the community. And so I'm wondering if you could give us a sense, well, not only information about the license, but for your open source, but what the community itself is like. I mean, where you fit in it, where it's growing, how many developers are yours alone and are coming from elsewhere? And do you have a good picture of how that's going?
Yeah. So we decided to go for initially MIT license, but as we got into incorporate more and more kind of like different elements and building blocks of machine learning, we decided that the best license for us was GPL, and that's what it is right now. Now, as to our community, right now, MindsDB has been installed about 250,000 times, but that's from about 27,000 developers. And we have a growing community within GitHub. As to where we see it in the next couple of months, and actually work that we're doing right now, is to still find what are the ways to empower existing communities to use MindsDB. And the natural progression for us is to natively empower existing database, especially open source databases, to be able to query models as if they were tables in their specific database, as well as to train them directly from the database. And that essentially kind of reduces the steps that any individual that has data that wants to do machine learning has to take. Because if their database is already capable of doing machine learning, then we're essentially just shrinking the steps significantly. So right now we're working on integrations, like native integrations with specific open source databases. And also our investors, they come from like the founders of MariaDB. So we know very well that those are communities that are in higher need of machine learning capabilities native to the database, and that's the next step for us.
So I'd like to get a sense of the patches and commits that come in. Are they mostly from your own people, or from people you outside your company and outside your immediate community, and how that's going?
Yeah, that's a great question. Since we are tailoring our solution for people that don't necessarily know about machine learning but are developers, many of our users or our community members are not experts in the machine learning building blocks that we abstract for them. Therefore, their contribution has been even more valuable to us in the sense of reporting bugs, testing it, making sure that it's gotten to the point where it is right now, which is a pretty stable for many, many use cases. Of course, we want to start transitioning into being able to empower, machine learning experts into contributing into MindsDB. However, most of the contribution has, code-wise, has been from our team. We've brought people from the community to become team members, but I think that for the next 6 to 12 months, that will continue to be our motto. So if you are contributing to our project in code, we would like to make you an offer to join us, because essentially we're a growing team and we would like to make sure that we can capture amazing talent that is bought into our vision.
Have you brought in? I just want to rip off that one thing. So you're recruiting from your own community there. That's kind of cool. Have you hired many people that way?
So we're very small. We're only 9 people, and of that, then some are from the community. We would like to grow our team significantly over the next 18 months, and therefore our preference would be someone that already is used to coding in the internals of MindsDB. However, again, we understand that we're not tailoring this product for people that are experts in machine learning. We are tailoring it for again, that are at the same time users. It's a hard balance to pursue.
So Jorge, we this is generating a lot of interest in the chat room. People are chatting away in our IRC channel as we're chatting here. So Jojo Dancer has been asking quite a few questions, which I failed to pass on so far. So I'm going to ask you a couple of those. So Jojo asks, what databases can this system access? How does it access remote databases? I think he's asking, can it interrogate data from external databases that, but through, I don't know, SQL or whatever else it might be?
Yeah, so right now we support MySQL and MySQL variants and Postgres variants, as well as files, and those files can be local or in S3. But we also make it very easy for anyone to build a data source, and we have documentation about this. We, right now, actually, if you're interested, please reach out, because we, in the next week or so, we are releasing not only the integration through the data sources, because we already have this, but the capacity to access MindsDB as if it was a MySQL database. And what this empowers you is to plug MindsDB as an external data source for many of the databases and data lakes that support MySQL. And therefore, you can look at the machine learning models that you've built on MindsDB as if they were tables in your original, or kind of like your de facto data lake or data storage.
And they're also asking if there's any support for Microsoft SQL Server via ODBC, which is something I haven't heard about in years. I used to use ODBC. I'm guessing is that on the roadmap? Is that something you might look at?
It's funny you mentioned this, because actually today we were having this conversation, and I even in my tabs in my computer, if I were to show you, I have one that has that plug of Microsoft SQL Server with external databases. And yes, we support it because essentially MindsDB Microsoft SQL Server supports already bringing in MySQL databases and MySQL tables. And since MindsDB already supports the standard MySQL protocol, TCP protocol, then you can plug it. Again, this is something we're releasing in this week and the following one. So if you're really interested into this, please send us an email, because we can give you first deeps into this very fantastic feature.
Excellent, that's great. So we're getting live feedback here, which is awesome. I was just wondering then. So you were talking about recruiting from your own community there. Do you have community events? Do you do things like conferences yet, or are you looking at like training events, things like that, maybe?
So again, this is really funny because we've had these conversations over the past week or so. Our plan for this year was really to have a lot of community events. We had a strategy that was around starting with the 3 cities in the U.S. that have the highest concentration of developers: New York, Austin, and San Francisco. However, with the current situation of social distancing, this strategy definitely cannot happen anytime soon. And therefore, we're going into a strategy that involves building these communities around existing databases and the communities that are already established in those databases. So we will create events and virtual events, but now instead of being geographically defined by the clusters of developers, they're going to be defined by concentrations of developers within existing databases.
Excellent. So I've got a very quick kind of jokey question for you as well, Jorge. It's not exactly a joke. It's something that people bring up a lot with, as somebody who's working in artificial intelligence, who's an expert in this field. We had some discussions even before the show started when I was chatting to people in the chat room there about what today's show would be about. And immediately somebody brought up Skynet and went, oh my God, they're building Skynet. What are we going to do? And the machines are going to take over. But based on what you were saying before about you're trying to provide people with tools to do this stuff, is that something you get asked a lot? Like, do people, if you say to people I work in artificial intelligence, they go, oh my God, the machines are going to take over. What are you doing?
And again, that's a science fiction topic, but I think that a lot of us, even at MindsDB, were science fiction geeks. So surely there will be a risk at some point where machines could take over just because of their capacity to learn will, let's say at some point, be better than the human capacity, and then from there it would be exponential. And our philosophy is that if that is a true future, and people like Elon Musk and others believe that is one, we cannot wait until that future happens. And therefore, the best thing that we can do to prevent that from happening is to build systems today that are meant for human augmentation rather than human replacement. And that is built within the philosophy of MindsDB. We really think that right now, there's little point in replacing humans. You can do much better by augmenting them. But if you design anything that has to do with machine learning and AI such that it can augment such humans continuously, then there's going to be little incentive in machines that will replace us. And the future that we see more likely, if we do the things right now, is that in which intelligence machines and humans will merge in that distant future where there's going to be computers that are going to be smarter. Those computers are going to be so integrated into the human decision-making process that humans and machines will become one. That is more of a nicer future to think than this weird and strange future in which machines have displaced human kind of like thinking capabilities.
Since we're getting down toward the end of the show and you're already kind of on the topic, I'd like to ask what your kind of midterm and long-term roadmaps are. Do you want to get really big? Or do you want to get kind of mid-size? Where do you see things going and over the next few months or years?
Yeah, I think that for us, big is as important as how much we can democratize machine learning. And again, we're or bought into the vision of a world where people make informed decisions. So of course we want to get it as big as to everyone is making an informed decision, because the world will be a better place. And I know it's very cliche to think you're like, oh, we're making the world a better place. We just want to ensure that informed decisions happen. And we want to get as big as to empowering as many individuals to do so without having to, give up their treasures of data. So we want to ensure that we can continue to do machine learning democratization to as many people as possible, and allowing them to keep their data where they think it's safe. And therefore, the short-term plans are to empower as many developers as we can. And to be more precise, right now, we want to jump from those 20-something thousand developers that use MindsDB to a few million. Again, there's 19 million developers today that don't know machine learning. Ideally, we want to empower all of those, but a few million is the target that we have for the next months. But beyond that, we know that as soon as developers plug data into a machine learning framework, and if that machine learning then you can move to the next stage, which is empowering non-technical users to use the data that their companies have or the people that they work with to make better decisions nonetheless. So I think that the longer-term future is to not empower just developers, but have augmented with data.
Well, I hope we caught that. There's a little bit of a Wi-Fi breakup at your end there, but I think we got that. It's an interesting dream to have pretty much everybody in the long run having ML become part of their lives. That's an interesting thing. I was a philosophy major back in college in the Pleistocene, but there was one philosopher we studied in particular who talked about the difference between tacit and explicit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is what we know but can't tell, and explicit is what we can only tell. And there's an awful lot we know intuitively. I mean, you've spoken about it intuitively, but but informing your intuition is a really interesting thing, because we're dealing with the world mostly by profiling. We say, that's a car, that's a person, that's somebody I know, there's somebody I don't know, that's somebody I should be afraid of, there's something I'm not, I have a hunch about this. And improving that process seems like a real dream come true that's much more interesting in a way than just we can move a lot of data into a little decision or something like that. It's exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we believe as well. We think it's exciting. And hello?
No, you're still there. There's
yeah, we agree with you. I think it's a very exciting future, and we want to be part of it.
So before we end the show, there's always three things we like to ask. But first is, are there any questions we haven't asked you that you would like to have been asked, and you can work in before we move on?
I think that your questions were even better than the ones that we wanted to be asked. As I told you, like, we were asking questions of things that we ourselves been talking about for the past weeks ourselves. So thank you for the questions. They're fantastic.
You're welcome. And thank the back channel too. And another one is our Joe question. Do you have anything to say or to do with blockchain?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a great question. I think that this is a question that we can talk for hours, but I believe that China is doing a great work with building a stable coin that is government backed, and they are tying these blockchains to their trade internationally. And if they nail that one, they will become the dominant coin of the future. And if we don't enable projects like Libra to happen, there is not going to be a competitor. So I see it as it is inevitably the future. We're so early on that we don't see it in its full potential, but it will happen, and it's happening now, and it's proven to work. I just think that stable coins backed by governments will be the next big thing, and China is moving fast in that direction, and especially now where trade is changing so much due to COVID and the current situation. It's a great opportunity, a great platform for those things to happen, and hopefully there will be other players so that it's so there are options to stable coins out there. And I think that Libra, being Facebook or not behind it, I think it's again, there are many other players behind that, and it's a viable competitor.
I know that Facebook had kind of backed off a bit on Libra, but is China's coin also Libra? Is that a different thing? As I know, WeCoin is big over there. What is their coin exactly?
So they started with a similar initiative to Libra called SAR, and I think that now they've named it to something else, but they're rolling it out strong inside, and now they're enforcing some of their commerce to happen on that coin. I think that they're doing it right, and they're doing what is supposed to happen, and I think that the whole purpose of a government is to adopt monsters rather than antagonizing them, and cryptocurrency is one of those. And I think
interesting.
The more
that's just huge.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're right. This is something we could digress about. We may have to have you back just to talk about that, because I think you're the first that I've heard to say that the Chinese approach is the one that's likely to succeed, or we might want to go with. I'd like to close with a question about that we ask every guest, which is, what is your favorite scripting language and text editor? Our geeks want to know.
I really like Go. It's not a scripting language; it's a language. As a scripting one, I love Python. I think that Python has democratized many things, and it's a community that empowers makers of all kinds, just as ourselves and the people that we go after. So Python would be that one. And since I fell in love with Python, someone introduced me to PyCharm, and I think that for me, PyCharm is probably the best suited editor.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a fabulous show. I expected to learn a lot, and I learned more than that, and I hope the audience did as well. So thanks so much for being with us, Jorge.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and looking forward to talk to you again.
So thanks again. That's been Jorge Torres of MindsDB. So Dan, going back over that, what stuck out for you on that?
I think one of the things that I found most interesting is I think we kind of, I almost asked this question without asking it in lots of roundabout ways, was that I'm quite a limited developer. I do mostly web stuff, and it's mainly kind of similar stuff. But I always think to myself that something like machine learning is way too high and complicated for me, and why would I bother? Not why would I bother, but would it be like, a sledgehammer to crack a walnut or whatever? But the message that Jorge was kind of giving there, which I really liked, the thing that MindsDB are trying to do is get people to think more about using machine learning and deploying. And as he said about small deployments, because we think of it as something that has to be on millions of servers, and you have to have a big data set that's going to need to live in a massive data center, and that's the way I've always thought of it. But I think it's changed my perception a little bit of what you can do with machine learning, and why I would want to do with it. So it seems like the sort of thing that would be fun to really play around with and learn a bit more about, and that they're giving a great kind of entry point for that.
Yeah, I love the democratization point. I had not gone in here thinking that that this would be useful to me personally, and And now I'm thinking, I got to know. I mean, I think that it looks like something that can actually be quite useful to me. And an interesting thing on the medical front is that back when I was working in Massachusetts at a thing hanging off the side of Harvard, I was in their medical system, and my hematologist was at the time, and maybe still, the top hematologist in the country. I mean, had been the head of the American Cancer Association and a bunch of other noble things. And I have a really minor blood oddity, and when I mentioned it to him, he said, "What is that?" What do you mean? You're the top guy. You should know. He said, "No, there are 100,000 hematological conditions, and nobody can know them all, and how they interact with other things in your genetics, in your environment, in your habits, in your exercise. There are all these other variables that can get thrown in there. And what are those, and how do those all play in?" And the damn thing is that, this is 12 years ago, something like that. But he was on like a Windows NT machine looking at my records that were copies of faxes of copies of other things that had been scanned and thrown in a big bin from my prior medical professionals, and they're all scrolling by on an 800 by 600 screen. It was like, oh my God, the American system, really bad. So I think there's a lot that we could do here. And I have a sense that once this comes in a way that it gets normalized, this may be what reforms the way medicine is practiced in backward countries like the U.S.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I've mentioned on the show in the past, I used to work for the NHS, which is the National Health Service here in the UK. As a developer, I was writing systems that people could use for accessing data. But at the time, we were just scanning in like JPEGs of people's records, which is unstructured data, which, as you point out, is really not a lot of use. But what's happening now, which is great, is that there's technology now for things like for me to scan old paper records and have things identify the actual data and pull it out. And with OCR and things like that, you can pull the data out and we could get structured data sets, and we can then start to use that data through systems like Jorge's talking about to actually make informed decisions. I think we're still a way off that at the minute. So I don't think the US is alone in that. Certainly in the UK, we're not doing great on that, as far as I know, although I haven't been involved with the NHS for well over 10 years. So I'm hoping they're a bit further on. But in Germany, they're doing this quite a lot. There's quite a few diagnosis systems in Germany. So diagnosis for obviously human conditions rather than systems diagnosis and all that sort of stuff. So it's an interesting field, and it's definitely growing. And I think it's something that we'll hopefully see accelerated through the likes of open source projects like this.
It's interesting on because we're dealing here, just part of the background on a show where you use Google Docs for a number of things, like the ad I read earlier is in a Google Doc. But I forgot this about Google Docs. It could do OCR. I'd forgotten that. And so it gives me hope that, my own accumulated unstructured data in printed documents that I can put into something like Google Docs can, in a fairly casual way, be turned into structured data or structurable data. And that's only a couple steps away from being fully useful. But that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, it is. It's really it is really a growing area, and I think we'll have to keep an eye on it. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we should check the back channel one more time to see what we might have missed. Are you still on here, Jorge? Are you still hanging with us here at all? I don't know. I have no way of telling, or if he checked out.
He's probably muted.
Oh well.
I was wondering what's coming up on the show in the future. What have we got in store? Do we know?
Well, a couple of things. Next week we have SysDig, and that's our next planned one. I'm reaching out to a bunch of people in my virtual Rolodex. I reached out to Nat Friedman. I haven't heard back, but it was just a couple of days ago, who I know from years past, but runs GitHub. And Eric Raymond of open source fame is another, and another is Guido van Rossum of Python. So there are a bunch of these that I'd like to get on. So I think for people who don't know me or do know me, I was a Linux journal from one way or another. I actually helped start it in 1994, and I've been with it since from 96 all the way up till last summer when it finally went under. Everything went under except for the website. The website is still there, courtesy of its last owners, who deserve credit for that. For people in the back channel, people watching and listening now, you can get in touch with us via our email address, which I'll put in the middle of the screen so I can look like I'm looking at the camera or looking at that, which is floss@twit.tv. So just floss@twit.tv. I'm also doc at twit.tv, but floss@twit.tv is the way to go. Send suggestions in there. We're open to all of them, and I'm open to any improvements you can make to me in my approach to the show. I think almost everything can be improved. So, I managed to improve the lighting today. That's the big thing for me. So all that background lighting there, the trees behind me in Santa Barbara are not, opaquing my face, so I look like a thumb or something. So, so thanks a lot, everybody, for sticking with us. Come back next week for SysDig and our conversation there, and for all the other future shows where I'll bring in new people and you can make suggestions and we'll make constant improvements. Because send your bugs and your patches, and to that email address, and we'll take them in. So thanks a lot.
Hi, I'm Jason Howell, host of All About Android, where each week I'm joined by Ron Richards, Florence Ion, and a rotating crew of Android journalists, developers, and enthusiasts, where we talk about the latest news, hardware, and apps for the Android faithful. You can subscribe by going to twit.tv/AAA or find the show in your podcatcher of choice. That's All About Android.